Hello, it's Amanda here from Lolli Lulu Crafts, and today we're going to be making a cute Christmas card using these lovely stamps from Clearly Besotted and also their complementary dies. The first thing I want to do is stamp the images out so the ink can be drying, because I'm actually going to be using some watercolour pens for this, and so I want to be sure that it dries properly before I actually start watercolouring. So I've got a piece of De La Rowney Aqua Fine, I think it's called, watercolour paper, and I'm going to be using my VersaFine ink, which is water resistant, so that will be fine to use with your watercolour markers. So we're just using the Tim Holtz stamp platform here. I'm not positioning them in any particular order other than just sort of far enough apart that the dies can cut around them. And there's the image, beautifully crisp, which I wasn't sure how it would stamp actually, because this is sort of a textured, as a lot of watercolour is, a sort of textured card, but it came out beautiful. So then for my base card, I've got this gorgeous piece of red cardstock, and I am cutting it to make a 5x7 card. So the long side is 10 inches and the short side is 7, and then I'm just scoring at 5 inches and folding in half to create my card base. And there it is. It's a side folding card, which is unusual for me, but that sort of size, it makes it a bit easier to not have to use two pieces of card to make it if you do it that way round. And then I'm just cutting some matte and layers using this gorgeous Anna Griffin Christmas paper. I don't know what collection it is, it's just in amongst a bundle of Anna Griffin that I've got, so I'm not really sure to be honest what collection it is, but I'm creating the first layer, the holly layer there is 1/8 of an inch smaller than the card, so 6 7/8 by 4 7/8, and then this piece here, to be honest, it's just by eye, so obviously it's the 4 7/8 across, but I wasn't sure how deep it was, a couple of inches only. And then I created a further mat on the front there. Again, it was just done by eye, and then a red mat underneath that green as well, just to make it sort of pop out. I then cut some more cardstock for the, or paper rather, it's not really card, some more paper for the inside of the card just to decorate that. I cut the holly and then realised that it was not going to give you anywhere to write, so I then cut the green piece, but for some reason I didn't cut a red mat to go under this green piece on the inside, and I think it would have looked better. I'm not sure that I'm as enamoured of the inside as I could have been had I put that red layer underneath that green. I think that would have looked a lot better, but it's fine, it's not a big deal. So then for the front, I'm just sticking my red snowflake paper on the bottom of the holly there. You could do that as two pieces and stick it to the front of the card, however I wanted to put ribbon around, so if you did that as two halves as it were, rather than one whole piece and then a half, you could do that and stick it directly down, but because I wanted to put ribbon around it, that obviously wasn't going to work because I wanted to tuck the ribbon behind, and if I had done that as two halves you couldn't have done that because you'd have had to stick it down to the front of the card for it to work, so that really would have been a bit not really ideal. And then I just put some tape pen on the ends of the ribbon just to sort of stick it in place, and then I lined it up with the top of the ribbon with the top of the red. I just checked it. Normally I would go kind of half and half, but it just didn't look quite right, so that time I did it that way. And then I'm just again putting my tape pen on the back. When you do that, do put a little bit on the ribbon at the sides just to give it some extra strength and holding it in place. And then we're just sticking that down on the front of our card, and you've got that lovely little red border around the edge, which looks really pretty. I think that looks really nice. It's both quite bold patterns, and with the red in the holly, I think that brings that in with the red of the snowflake paper, so I like that. And then of course the green matches in the holly leaves as well, so I think all these colours work really nicely together, and it's that holly paper that's bringing it together. Now I'm not sticking this 2 layers together yet, just because I wasn't too sure how it was going to work with my little characters and whether I needed to make it a bit smaller. So I thought I'd wait and colour these in first. So for my colouring here, I'm using my Zig Clean Colour Real Brush markers or pens, and I'm just taking them, putting a little bit of the colour down, say where you want it to be the darkest, and then smudging it. It's trying to give a word, but sort of, I guess, watercolouring it out a little bit to the lighter area, so that the lightest area is obviously, as you drag it out, the ink with the water, the ink is diluted more and more, and so you get that slightly lighter section. So it's just very delicate, it's not very precise, it's just they're characters, they're not like, you know, really major, so it doesn't need to be perfect. And to be honest, you could quite easily colour this flat without even worrying about putting kind of shadowing in, and you'll see my shadowing anyway is very, very minute. It's just sort of around where his legs are and stuff like that. I've just added it a little bit darker, but essentially he's almost one colour, so it's not really a big deal. And you can see by spreading it out there how it's got a bit paler to the side, so I've just added a little bit more of the ink around to the edge there because I didn't want it quite so pale on that side. And so I've taken like a reddy brown because I just always think of Rudolph as being a sort of a reddy brown colour, and then I've taken the darker brown colour to use as the shadows, and then I've just blended it together with the water. I'm not too worried about it going over the outside of the lines because I'm obviously die cutting it, so that's not a big deal. I think had I thought about this a little bit more, I would have waited until the brown had dried. You can see how the red is smushed into the brown, and I'm actually having to use another dark brown to kind of hide that colour a bit. And I had to even go a bit darker because it just wasn't quite doing it. So, you know, that was a lesson learned, really. I guess I was just sort of thinking, carry on, and I should have just gone on to the next character and then come back and done his nose. But, you know, you don't always think, but hopefully you can learn from my mistakes. But as you can see, even though it's a mistake, he still looks really cute. I think that at this stage he looks pretty messy, but what I learned, I think, was that actually by the time it dries and you cut it all out, it's really forgiving, and you can get away with a lot more than you think. So you're looking at that at the moment and he probably looks a right mess, but I think when you see it at the end, you'll see what I mean about the colour, and it actually settles down pretty good. For my snowman here, I just took a very pale grey and a very sort of light icy blue and just put it around the edge on the left hand side there, just to create a little icy tinge and a little bit of shadowing. But again, if you're going for not such a this sort of slightly more kind of shaded look, then you could just leave it completely plain and leave him white and do what I do later, which is add some glitter. And then I kept him pretty simple with the scarf and everything in the green because I wanted to keep that matching in with the colours of the card, and obviously I knew that my Santa was going to be red, so I thought that would work pretty well, having that green rather than the reds. And then I've colouring my Santa using a plain red and then a very slightly darker red for the shading. But again, if you're not bothered about that part, then you could just ignore that. So you'll see here I'm just using a white gel pen just to go over the areas where I managed to smudge the red into the white, and that's just covered that enough. And then I realised that I'd missed the bottom of the balloons there, so I just did that. So you can see now how it's dried and it looks a lot better, and I'm now using the dies to cut the little characters out. So I'm doing Rudolph and the snowman. I went to put the Santa down as well, but sometimes what happens with the magnetic platform, because I'm using the magnetic platform, if you put too many dies close to each other, they sometimes react and it pushes the magnet pushes it away and out of position. So that was what was happening here. So I just had to do the two first and then go back and do my Santa afterwards. And you'll see now that I've popped these out, I think it looks even better. You can really see that you can actually get away with murder. They've turned out all right now. They've dried and cut out. I think they look absolutely fine. And I'm going back now and I'm just cutting out my little Santa. So next I am taking that Cosmic Shimmer glitter glue and I'm just putting a little bit on my craft mat here, and I'm actually going to paint it onto my snowman. And the reason I'm doing it that way is because I wanted to have the control to put it exactly where I wanted, and I didn't want like a really thick blobby layer. I wanted a thin coating, and you can see how it's just given a beautiful shimmer to my little snowman, and I think it looks so pretty, and I think it's just added that something extra, and being I think thinner, it's just much more subtle. And then I decided that I actually really liked it, so I was going to added some to my little Santa as well, just on his beard here. But I guess you could add it to the gloves and the little pom-pom and all those white areas if you wanted, but I just decided to go just for the beard. And again, I just think that looks really pretty. And then I thought, well, I've got to do something on Rudolph, and so instead of the crystal coloured one, I used an orangey red for his nose. So now I need to stamp both my sentiment and the little strings, because these are like little balloons, so I need to add the strings. So first I'm adding my sentiment at the bottom because I know I want that there, and that's going to help me ensure that I position my characters and their strings in the right place, and that it's not going to accidentally end up covering my sentiment and then I would have nowhere to put it, which would be really annoying. So now I'm just playing around positioning my little characters, just thinking about where I want them to so they look good, and also in view of the actual strings. So there's the little string stamp, and you can see I've actually overlapped my Rudolph and Santa, and I'm just putting that string down straight, and I'm back. I did my sentiment in the black, the Versifying, but I'm doing my string in Stampin' Up's Old Olive. I wanted a much softer colour, and I thought the green would look nice because it would be very soft on a green background. I tested it on a scrap piece with the black, and it was just too much. It was too hard. And the Santa string I did straight, but the other two I actually take the stamp. I wasn't able to show you, but I took the stamp, and you can see here I've just slightly curved it. So basically you just stick it down, and then you hold down one end, and then you lift up the other and sort of bend it around to whichever direction you want to create that curve. So I went for quite a subtle curve, but it actually will bend quite a lot if you want it to. And but I didn't really need it to do too much. I didn't want it to be that much off straight because it would be hanging down. It was just to give an indication that maybe there was a little breeze or there was some movement in the balloons or whatever. So I just decided to do that because I just thought it would look nice. Then on this stamp set there's some more little sentiments, and one of them is a hoe, as in ho ho ho, and it's an individual hoe, which I really liked. So I've actually positioning the three hoes, as it were, you know, the ho ho ho, but I'm doing them in different places rather than in a row across the card. And again, I thought that looked quite cute. It's sort of like your Santa is sort of moving around. I just felt it gave it some movement, and I liked that. So then I am taking that once it's dry, and I am just putting some tape pen on the back, and I will be adhering that to my red mat so that we've got that lovely sort of just that lovely border around, and it just pops it off that background of the main card. But I did want to give it even more pop, and I've actually put some foam tape on the back just to give it a little more dimension. I just thought that looked much nicer. And then I added some foam tape on the back of my little characters. I have to say that after the event, when I showed the card to my family, my dad was like, "Oh, do these wobble?" I was like, "Oh no, I can't believe I didn't think of that," because I've got action wobbles, and I thought that would have been so cool. So I'm so annoyed that I didn't think of that until it was too late. Well, I didn't even think of it, but I'm so annoyed all the same with myself for not thinking of it, because I think that would have been a really, really cool idea. Now here you can see I've just on one layer of the tape, and because I'm overlapping my Rudolph over my Santa, I need to do a second layer. So I'm peeling off the back, I'm just sticking another layer of foam onto my little Rudolph, and now my Santa will just tuck just that little edge underneath the Rudolph there, without bumping it and being annoying. So I think that again gives different levels as well, so I think that works really nicely. So just playing around with the position to make sure I'm happy with it in relation to the string, in relation to each other and everything, and then just one at a time peeling off the back, but also adding to it some Cosmic Shimmer. I want to ensure that these stay put. Foam tape, as I frequently say, will tend to get rid of its stick a lot quicker than Cosmic Shimmer, because heating just affects it terribly. So if you always put something like a wet glue on the back there, you'll find that it will give you more longevity with your cards. Also, to be honest, when you can see here, it gives me some movement as well. I'm just fiddling around with my little characters because the glue's wet, and so it gives me that little bit of movement time. So now I'm taking some of that ribbon and my bow maker here, and I'm just I originally went for the largest one, as you saw, and then I decided I wanted to double bow it, so I went to one down and then up to the largest sort of slot, I guess you'd call it, and then you poke the ribbon through the hole over one tail, as it were. So then you create that knot, and then you pull it through the center and you knot it. You only need to do a single knot. Just pull it so the tails are sort of relatively how you want them to be. You don't necessarily want one up in the air or whatever. You may do. If you do, that's fine, but kind of try and get it roughly right. This is the back of your bow, and this is your front of the bow, and that is a much nicer, the front actually, where because you've taken the ribbon over and around, it gives a nice sort of front knot to the bow. It doesn't look like a knot, it actually looks like a nice sort of wrap around, which is kind of cool. So I'm just playing around with my tails there, and then decided to cut them into little sort of flaggy point things. I don't know what you call those, like, anyway, those little pointy tails. And this ribbon is a little bit fiddly because it's got lots of fibres in it, and so you think you've cut it and you haven't, but anyway, we got there in the end. I didn't want the tails too long because I didn't want it to overlap on the sentiment, but I did want it to kind of fill, there was like a bit of a gap in the design on the side there, so I wanted it to just fill that gap in a bit. And then again, just taking my Cosmic Shimmer, putting it over the now peeled foam tape, couldn't think what I was trying to say, and then popping that down. I did play with the idea of putting that off squiff slightly, the mat, so it was at an angle, but I decided I didn't want to in the end. And can you see down by the sentiment where we're going to put the bow, there's kind of a little bit of a gap, and that's what I was trying to do with the bow, is just sort of fill that in where it was a bit empty. Because it just design wise, I think it needed something there. So you can see normally you might put the bow much more central to that ribbon where you've got it, but I'm just pushing it as far as I can so it's just touching the bottom of the ribbon, so it still looks okay, like it's part of it, but enough so that it's actually filling that gap. And you can see now that that gap's now sort of not there because it's got something in it. So now, as a final touch, I'm just taking some beautiful sequins. I'm just sort of randomly positioning them using my poke tool, a little bit of sprinkling, seeing where they land, and I've used both the red and the white and obviously the crystal. And then I'm just taking my Zig two-way glue pen, I'm putting a little dot down, I move the sequin out the way from where I want it to be, put the dot of glue down and use my pokey tool just to push it back. What you'll find is at this point it doesn't feel like it's stuck because the zig is really wet. You just leave it alone and give it 5 minutes, not even that probably, and it will glue down and it will be stuck really good. So that is it. That is my card for today. I hope you have enjoyed making this with me. I think it looks really fun and vibrant, and I think I hope you do too. I think it's great. Don't forget to go on over to the blog post. If you're on YouTube, go to the paragraph below this video, click show more, and then you'll see a link under the heading corresponding blog post. Click on that, it will take you to the blog post that goes with that this video, and on there you'll see loads of photos, information, and hopefully some links for you of products. Quite a bit of this, obviously, like the paper, etc., I don't have the details, but I can put details of the stamps, etc. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again soon. Bye for now. Bye.